welcome back to another episode of Wall Street Sports Insight, in-depth analysis, coverage at the intersection of sports and business. I am your host, Carson Fowler. Our third show, new week, new guest. This time I am joined by none other than LA's finest, Griffin Stark. Welcome to the pod, my friend. Good to see you.
Great to be here, Carson. Thanks for having me tonight.
No problem, dude. Glad we were able to get you from sunny California. I know it's about 6 p.m. your time. We're doing later podcast, so we had to figure out the time change. But I got a quick introduction for Griffin here. Short, but really not so short. Griff's an upcoming sports management and finance senior at Syracuse University's Falk School of Human Sport and Human Dynamics. Former operations ambassador at the Cooperstown Dream Parks, current director of operations for SU's men's ice hockey team, and current intern at Wasserman in its professional football department. Most importantly, one of my great friends, also got a great baseball and golf swing. Griff, obviously been wanting to get you on the show for a long time since we got this thing started, especially buzz around the NFL and the potential for the league to allow private equity investment. It had previously prohibited it. Let's get this thing started with some of your first thoughts, man.
Yeah, so in general, we'll just give a brief rundown about what private equity is. It's also known as PE, and it's typically a type of investment that involves owning or having an interest in a company that is not publicly traded. And so PE investments can come from high net worth individuals, firms, or private equity funds. And then PE firms typically hold investments for 4 to 7 years and can generate profit in a few different ways, from venture capital, buyouts, management fees, or even profit cuts. And then Harris Williams of the Bloomberg sports business, he's a reporter for them. He mentioned that Bloomberg Radio or mentioned on the Bloomberg Radio that private equity firms will potentially have the opportunity to bid for 30% of the stake in these teams. So you could technically have three PEs come in and they can each work for 10%, but the max you can reach there is 30%. So this gives a lot of leeway for owners who are possibly struggling financially for their standards, and you can bring them in and help find liquidity in other ways through these PE firms.
And okay, so Griff, I know you're a big hockey guy, and I'm aware that other professional sports leagues are allowing this sort of thing already, like the NHL, for example. How would this sort of investment from private equity benefit these leagues, and how might it benefit the NFL?
Well, it's just more money. And what it really comes down to at the end of the day is you're bringing in funds. And that's what this league does. And when it comes to the NFL is already the biggest moneymaker in
Right.
America and possibly all of sports. Close up there with soccer, but soccer's already letting in all these PEs and you can see where that's gone. So I feel like that's kind of the trajectory that the NFL sees in this. And I mean, it's basically what is drives revenue, drives money, drives the organizations. Everything kind of falls in to the category of we need to be making money. And that's what PEs do best. They know what they're doing. And if you're bringing this into the biggest moneymaker, the possibilities are endless. And it's going to be really exciting to see what they can do for the fans and for the organizations.
So it's Josh Harris, majority stake owner of the Washington Commanders, Philadelphia 76ers, rather, NHL's New Jersey Devils, Crystal Palace. He spoke at CNBC's CEO Summit in DC about some of the future evaluations of professional sports teams, which isn't much of a surprise considering he most recently purchased the Commanders for more than $6 billion, which was the most money ever spent on a professional sports team. He said it was the quote, hardest deal he's ever had to commit to. So obviously the NFL is evaluating its sports teams at a extreme high right now, and it's going to be harder for potential owners to, for lack of better words, fit the bill, right? And that's why they're allowing private equity to come in and sort of, loosen this up and allow these owners to not commit so much of their net income and net worth to buying a sports team, right?
Absolutely. And it comes down to it's great for the owners because this gives them some flexibility and gives them a little bit of leeway in their percentage of how much they can actually own of these teams. But all in all, that allows for it's a benefit for minority owners because it gives people a chance to get into these opportunities and that possibly weren't able to do that anymore. And I saw somewhere that there's only like nine, only 900 billionaires in the United States, and so the number is down from what it is in the past. And this just gives a chance for people to buy more of the organizations because obviously prices are going up and everything with that. And so it's very important for the minority owners in general just to get their hands and get into the league this way. And so it's really exciting just to see trajectory because like I keep saying, like it's really exciting to see the possibilities of what can happen because money is what drives and the NFL can continue to make that. And with this on board, it's going to be unbelievable. It really will be.
So what I've heard is that private equity will have the opportunity to invest in the NFL and its franchises. However, it will not be involved in the decision making. I know this is probably a long ways away. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that would eventually change? I know, like Eli Manning, for example, his private equity group is Brand Velocity, and I'm sure a former NFL player would love to have some insight and say into his investment in a sports team. But right now, it doesn't seem like that's the case.
It's not really the case right now. And I mean, it might get to that point because there aren't a ton of billionaire athletes as it is. I mean, LeBron's one of them, Jordan's one of them. Jordan has owned a team in the past. And this just gives more of a possibility for players that are coming up and making more money. I mean, we could see down the line, Patrick Mahomes might be an owner of a franchise in the NFL, as he already owns part of the Royals. He owns another stake in the Kansas City Football Club. And so it's a big discrepancy just from what it was obviously 10, 20, 30 years ago and what can be happening in the future. It could develop into something where we say maybe they're owning multiple teams or they have private equity stake in multiple teams. And I just think I think something is going to change and there's going to be rules that are obviously going to have to follow along this whole line of what's happening.
Sure. Yeah.
And but getting to start, we're at a start. 30% have three. You can have 8 equity owners as long as you get to that 30%. You need that, and it could be years before something actually comes into fruition or something like that. But having the ability for these PEs to come in and bring in revenue, just repeat it. It's repeating, but that's just really what it is about the sports: is revenue, 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 and the NFL does it better than no one else.
So we mentioned earlier in the podcast, this would be an opportunity for some NFL owners whose net worth is dependent on their team's success. So now you think about the fact that they're not committing so many dollars to their franchises. So now they can put money towards renovations or other plans to build a new stadium or move the team potentially. And earlier, I read earlier that said the taxpayers have paid over $4.3 billion since 2000 on some of these renovations. So this inherently would be a good thing, right? More money, kind of fragmented, so more money essentially can be made back into the franchise, right?
Yeah, it's as much help as the owners sometimes do and do not need. We can see it, and we saw it in our own backyard. Like the taxpayers in New York, they're trying to pay for the stadium for the Bills, and they're renovating it, and it's supposed to be upwards of like $1 billion. And when you're putting that money in for the taxpayers, most of them, some of them do watch football and some of them don't. And this would help give the owners a lot of leeway because these PEs are coming in and they're helping fund for these stadiums. And another example is Clark Hunt with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was only willing to pay for $200 million of the $800 million renovations to Arrowhead. And through that, PE firm comes in. That allows Clark Hunt a lot more flexibility. He'd have to give up some of his stake, obviously, if he wants to allow for these PEs to come in and help with that. But everyone wants the Chiefs to stay in Kansas City. I
Right.
mean, there's nowhere else for them to go. And that's the only chance that they have to renovate the stadium is if they're getting taxpayer dollars, or eventually it gets to the point where Clark Hunt has to sell some of his stake and then get some of that $800 million because he said he was only doing 300. So that PE could come in and do the other 500 and fully flesh it out and keep those Chiefs in Kansas City like they should be.
Absolutely. So Goodell mentioned, that being the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, he said, quote, "We've got a lot of interest in the private equity space. We are making real progress on potential private equity. We are going to continue to be very deliberate, but I expect there to be something by the end of the year." Um, if you're in this position, if you're thinking about investing in a team, what do you believe the timeline would be for this sort of framework to be worked out? Do you think it's going to become before the season starts in September, or maybe this is going to be something that's going to, play out for longer than expected.
I definitely see this taking a little longer to play out. With expansion definitely on the coming up in the NFL, it could be very interesting to see where this goes, and not just expansion in the NFL, but with the NBA, which is obviously ready for expansion into Mexico City, either some other states. Like you can go outside of the United States with a PE, and it just makes it so much easier for these owners to get the funds, get that right. And with the NFL, though, I could totally see something coming out around Thanksgiving, around Christmas time as the year's wrapping up, and they make these final says for what they're going to be planning to do for 2025.
Sure.
And I think this definitely heads the top of the list. And they're already talking about it right now. And I still think that more and more leeway, more and more headway is going to go into the new year. And really, like it could be tomorrow for all we know. I just still think it's going to play out over time. There's a lot of intricacies to work out for this if you're going to allow PEs to come in. And as the only professional sports organ or league that didn't have this before, they can learn something from their other organizations or other leagues. And I think the NFL will do just fine with that.
I definitely agree. I think this is something that is definitely going to need to be looked over and developed over time. It's definitely not something that the NFL wants to rush in. I think they're in no need to rush to get into this. I think it's a very marketable and profitable opportunity. But I think right now it's not on a need basis. This is something they
Oh,
probably want to
absolutely.
do, but won't be like tomorrow, for
Yeah,
example.
the NFL has been fine, and if they would have desperately needed it, they would have already tried to rush into this.
Right.
But you see it every Sunday, like the product's out there, like the money is there. They have not found any reason for them to come into their league and kind of change the way things have. But just with the trajectory and everything, I just think the NFL could really, really skyrocket from this. From I think they could get into the Premier League, and I think they can really challenge European soccer with this.
Totally agree. And I mean, the thing is, they are on the right side of this because this is really only coming up because there are only so many billionaires that can really front the bill, like we mentioned earlier, to actually purchase an NFL franchise. I believe Jerry Jones bought the Dallas Cowboys for like a couple hundred million, and now it's worth almost $9 billion. Some people have been evaluated 12. So, you know, I certainly don't know anyone that's going to fit a $12 billion bill for an NFL franchise, but I'm sure there are a few. Griff, before we let you go, one of my final questions. Obviously, the goal of a private equity firm is to generate profit and get money back in their investors' pockets. Now, another thing to consider is the assessment of risk, right? Because I would assume that the fans' primary concern would be the prioritization of profit over the team's success if private equity firms were to invest in these NFL franchises. So do you see that battle where eventually financial interests would drive decision making and maybe team success would take a backseat, or do you think that's something that would never become the case?
It's an interesting way to go about it because the NFL is different than other leagues with their league think policy and how everyone does get the bits from the media that they're getting. So everyone will have like the same salary cap and everything. So it does come down. It's definitely different than baseball for sure. And we've seen what PE has done to baseball in some of these organizations. And it is kind of sad. But the realistic view that the NFL has of this, and I think one that fans are going to kind of see is with the Middle Eastern firms and these oil companies, they have a lot of money. How would an NFL franchise, are they going to be willing to allow someone from the Middle East to come in with this kind of money? And if they are, how are the fans going to react from that?
Yeah,
And
sure.
it's a huge question mark that's coming in. And who are they going to allow to be in? Is it just going to be United States PEs? Is it going to be global PEs? It's a huge question mark, and there's a lot of things they got to run through. And so with that said, I don't think that teams are going to lack in success. And obviously, money is still going to be the priority. But with an NFL team, you like fans go when you're good. Like we've seen like empty stadiums for some really bad teams, even
Sure.
some really good teams. And it's just a matter of filling up those seats, which they will always do. And they will be putting out that product and trying to win football games regardless of what it is. And I really believe that it's going to be an exciting thing to watch because they're going to make it better for the fans, they're going to make it better for the owners, and they're going to make it better for the league in general.
Griff, want to tie this up with a bow on the end. What are some of your final thoughts on this? I know we talked about a potential timeline. What do you think 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, private equity could do for the National Football League?
Realistically, I kind of hope they stay with United States PEs just from the way that we've seen in other sports and baseball where these owners have come in that don't really know the sport that well. And their main goal has always just been winning or making money, sorry, not winning. And when you're making money, that doesn't correlate to W's.
Right.
And I think that some of the owners here have a very good grasp and have grown up watching professional American football. And it could definitely be something down the line where, yeah, they get into even more money because obviously the rates are just going to continue to go up as the years go on. And we might not have that money. There might only be these oil companies out in the Middle East that have that money to bring that in. And with maybe even more billionaires going down, it's going to just need PE firms to come in. And so I could, we'll might see the 30% raise to 50% eventually. But I think once they get to that 30% and they finally put that in, I think that's where we're going to be for now. But I could 100% see it going to a place where private equity goes beyond 50%. And we
I
get
want to
owners
play one last
forever.
question off that final point because that's a great one. Would you ever see a place that we get to where a private equity firm could be the majority stakeholder in an NFL franchise, or is that just like completely
I
bonkers?
think that comes down to the ownerships because a lot of them are family owned. And if they're willing to continue to, I mean, not necessarily deal with all the stuff, but continue to be a force in these markets. I think that as long as these families are kind of staying in control, I think that it can 100% be something that is definite. And I don't know. I really don't think that PEs will eventually. I think it will be 50% max. I don't see it ever going above that because I just think they always want. They need a majority holder, and so I think, or 49% max technically, and
Sure.
so I think that they're going to try and keep. They want to give the current owners the benefit of the doubt more than anything. So I could 100% just seeing it being giving them the benefit, keeping it at a 49, not really going over that because the owners love their money and they love their franchises. So I don't see them giving them other percentages of that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Griffin Stark, everyone, thank you for joining the podcast today. Wall Street Sports on YouTube and at WSS Sports on Twitter. Definitely follow my man Griffin Stark on Twitter. Really great content on his channel as well. Um, Griff, thanks so much for coming on today. For everyone listening, we'll see you next week. Thanks.
See you, boys.